This is a special presentation from 12 Corners Middle School.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us. I think we've got probably just about everybody in. I'm sure some people will continue to join along the way, and we're happy to have them do so. I'm Kevin McGowan, the Superintendent of Schools here in Brighton, and really excited that you could be here for this opportunity to have a discussion with us and for us to walk through some of your feedback, address some questions, and really get some suggestions from you and engage in a conversation. The way the night's going to work is we'll spend the first chunk or so of the meeting, the first 15, 20 minutes, walking through the feedback that you gave us both from the hybrid thought exchange and the remote thought exchange. And I'll ask our administrators from the middle school to weigh in on some of your questions, your thoughts, your suggestions. And I'd encourage you along the way to please enter feedback into the chat as well while we're working through those. And then we'll have a period of time where we open it up and ask everybody and anybody who would like to unmute themselves and engage in a conversation with us for as long as you'd like to do that. And then we'll finish up by making sure we check in on the Facebook Live feed and the comments that are entered there, so we're answering any of those questions too. And again, thanks very much for joining us. Also, thanks to Mr. Jim Nunez, principal at the middle school, Sarah Jacob, assistant principal, Dr. Mike Malloy, assistant principal, I see Dr. Baker, assistant superintendent, Lua Limo, assistant superintendent, Deanna Spagnola, Director of Student Support Services, joining us as well. I also see Mark Kokonovich, our Board of Education President, is on this Zoom also to hear your feedback. So thanks to all of them for making themselves available tonight and engaging this conversation too. And thanks to all of you. So let's jump right in, and I'll ask Mr. Nunez to address a couple of issues in a second and go through some of those comments. I'm going to share first the feedback that you shared from the hybrid exchange, and we'll go through some of those comments. This first comment here is about 2 study halls plus when waste of time on precious in-school days works out to 2 hours of unproductive and active time. Schedule should be arranged for active teaching on in-school days. At the least, this time could be engaging social community building, and that's a great point. There's another comment later in the exchange about 6th grade foreign language, and these two things are intimately related, so I would like to address them as we start off, and then certainly ask the middle school to jump in on any elaboration. 6th grade foreign language was reduced in the budget last year. It had to be cut in our spending plan, and then we had to cut it outright. Not what we wanted to do. Valuable program, important program for us, and something that we would have liked to have had in place for the long haul. It's been an important program for us. However, we couldn't do it. So we had to cut it. It was an expense, and that's what we had to live with. The problem is, although we could cut that program, kids are still with us during that period of time. And we cut the teaching staff, which is the expense of the program more than anything, but we still would have room in the schedule for kids to be supervised during that period of time, and they need someplace to be. So if you picture the middle school schedule or a high school schedule, frankly, any schedule, but particularly middle and high school, as a giant Rubik's Cube, but a Rubik's Cube that has to be meshed with the Rubik's Cube of where adults are at the same time. And it's a very complicated process of having your kids in the right place at the right time and having a teacher available for them in the right place at the right time based on what they need also. And so when we limited one part of that, which was the adults available to them, we put further constraint on the schedule, and the only place for them to be then during that time was a study hall. And there isn't a way to maximize their time differently and have a teacher with them without paying for the cost of that teacher, which was the reduction in the first place. So the only way to make that more productive, in other words, would be to have a teacher with them, which was what the reduction was because of a lack of resources. It's not ideal. It's certainly something that concerns us. But I'm wondering if Mr. Nunez could just comment on what is it that we're hoping is accomplished during that time when kids have that time so that it is productive for them? What are we talking to kids about in terms of being able to use that time most effectively?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. McGowan. I certainly understand the concern regarding that time, and I can absolutely see the side of families with the inclusion of study halls in their schedules. However, we have seen and are aware that our students are doing a nice job of getting work done throughout the course of those study halls. They are also utilizing that time in receiving extra help from teachers, and they are have been using that productively. In some ways, the downside to that is that having all their work done in school then eliminates that need to do work at home, which could be some additional practice at home as well. But we are looking at utilizing that time in different and more creative ways. One ways that we will be looking at using is relationship building through community building, and using some restorative measures to try to include in that time to help and assist with being more flexible with that time.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Mr. Nunez. Appreciate that. In thinking about this other comment here, can music lessons be on independent learning days instead of remote Wednesdays when our kids have to miss class? What was the thinking around scheduling for music lessons? And is that a possibility, or could that be looked at? Dr. Malloy, as a scheduler too, you may want to weigh in on that. Jim?
Yeah, so we definitely think it's something that we can look at. And I know that there was a great deal of constraints that went into the scheduling for music, given the number of students who were in the remote setting compared to the hybrid setting. Also, in addition to that, were the constraints given to students in the music world and in given areas having to be 12 feet apart for social distancing. So that did contribute a great deal to those decisions. Dr. Malloy, would you like to contribute some thought into that?
Yeah, our music staff did a lot to try to retain live playing. And as Mr. Nunez just said, the live playing, especially with instrumental music, has some really serious, our most serious constraints with COVID capacity and social distancing. Chorus in any instrument where you're, blowing into the instrument, it requires a 12-foot distance. So that put some music departments have gone to like pure theory type, lessons where the children really aren't playing music at all. And that was kind of the trade-off. The music department at the middle school felt very strongly to have the students playing as much as possible. And that comes with it to some of the decisions of, they're meeting more often than a typical band would, or in different places throughout our building. We have some people meeting in the auditorium, some people meeting in our brand room. So it's definitely a challenge.
Great, thank you. Another comment here around individual teachers doing a great job communicating. Some inconsistency, though, across the board with that or with school-wide communication. So somebody looking for a little bit more consistency and thought around that. Anything you'd like to weigh in on about that? And then also, if you guys could give some thought to this idea of expectations on the at-home days, and this person's comment about very little contact and little to do. I will make a quick editorial comment before we even dig into that. In the French Road Town Hall last hour, we had this conversation. I remember both as a principal, but as an elementary teacher, there was always this conversation about, down the hall, this person does this, and my child has more homework, or this child has less. It's hard sometimes to compare classroom to classroom. I think this person is experiencing something that is different in terms of expectations, whereas there are other people commenting that there's too much work to do on those independent days, and that it's a really overwhelming day also. So I'm wondering if any one of the three of you could weigh in on this concept of, one, the communication piece, and what are we looking for both from ourselves in terms of the school communication, but also teacher communication. What kinds of things have you talked to our staff about in regards to that? And I'm glad it's been really positive in some cases also, or most cases. And then expectations on those independent days. Jim?
Yeah, so the communication piece was something that we really had to work a great deal with as the school year started. With many of our teachers who work in both the hybrid and the remote setting, there's a great deal of communication that had to go home. As teachers have the flexibility and the autonomy to create their schedules in those remote settings according to their lesson plans, communication was going out a great deal. And so what we learned was that with that communication that was going out, there needed some structure and systems around how that communication was going home and how it could have been more clear to families with regards to what child that correspondence was applying to, what grade level, and to what content. So we tried to streamline that process by communicating to our teachers to really use that subject line heading area to clearly identify, one, what was the content, who was the teacher delivering that message, and and streamlining it for that individual child in the family. There were several families who we know have more than one child at TCMS, so that correspondence was becoming greatly confusing. So we hope that over the course of this time, that correspondence has become more and more systemized and easier for families to utilize and to organize at home. With regards to expectations for those home days, with that given autonomy for our teachers, we recognize that some teachers may give more work and some less, and depending on what the unit calls for, but we know that that work is very important because it builds off lessons that were done the previous day and also is going to build onto the lessons that students are coming to the next day. So as it might vary in quantity, we know that the quality of the work is valuable, and that the work itself is going to build on itself and be extremely important for the course of the work in that unit.
Thanks a lot. I see another comment in here about communication, about teachers responding to emails, and I've got to tell you, I think this is probably a good moment for me just to kind of interject something here about what is happening and kind of the overall picture. And I do it with a little bit of hesitation, not because I'm not exceptionally proud of the work that's happening, and I don't want to sing that from the mountaintops, but the dynamic of this has been interesting over time. If I go back to the first few months of the shutdown, I would often say how impressed I was with the work that was being done and how tricky this was to adapt to an entirely new environment very quickly. And I realized at some point, and certainly had feedback from people too, that their lives were really tricky too. And that was really, really hard, to be hearing how great everybody was doing when their lives were a challenge at home. The issues people were having economically with their own jobs, the challenge of their own jobs, the overall experience people were having. And so it was this right balance of, I want to make sure people know how well people are doing, but be sensitive to the fact that at home, not everybody's doing well and feeling great about things. But it is important for me to point out to our community, the lift that has been made by our staff has been monumental. And if you think about the amount of innovation that has happened for people over the past several months, it is far more than happened really over the last century in education. And so they've done a remarkable job, and we should be doing that job, right? So we also get it. There are people that are thinking, well, you've got to educate my child, and this is your responsibility. Oh, we understand that, and we're right there with you. But I can also acknowledge that so many people have done this so very well, and we appreciate that work. With communication, I will tell you the volume of email that is being received by people is dramatic. We're talking hundreds of messages. So I get it, and I would say to you, if you're not getting a response, please let us know so that we can gently remind and encourage people that that's got to happen. But also understand that is probably a result of volume, and maybe something got missed. So please tell us, because so many people are doing such a great job with that and are really attentive to that and trying to be very responsive to people. And we need to keep thinking about how to support that and how we can provide systems for that and make that a more efficient approach. So please say the word, let us know. People will want to know, and it could be simply that something was missed. With all of this, I would also tell you that when I say that, I'm not diminishing or dismissing the constructive feedback, because we do want to hear that. So any of the things we're answering tonight is not because we don't want to get better, that we're not open to the criticism. That's why we're very vulnerable in this and having this conversation. We definitely want to know that. Another comment that came up was around the amount of time kids are spending in school, and this issue around social emotional connection and how no connection with teachers is challenging. I'm going to answer the 5-day-a-week versus hybrid question, but I also ask Mrs. Jacobs to think about social emotional connection with kids, the mental health side of it. She works really closely with our counseling staff to support families in that way and has put a lot of thought into that. The issue around 5 days versus hybrid and how we ended up this way is one that's come up in different places. And I would just say to you that when we looked at the guidelines and what was required to keep our students, their families, and our staff and their families and our community as safe as possible, we recognized that we didn't have the space to distance people enough to be able to have all of our kids in the building at the same time. And that even if we could put kids into smaller groups and pods that would keep a distance, we would be then shuffling them from place to place in very much not meaningful instructional circumstances, with adults simply watching them as opposed to teaching them. we don't have enough adults to do that in the first place, but also that really diminishes the program and it wasn't possible. So to have everybody back full time, 5 days would be our strongest desire. That's what our objective would be. However, it just can't happen under the current guidelines. And by the way, the guidelines are also working. So I'm also getting asked a lot of questions about, well, do you see that changing? Do you see us coming back, et cetera? And I've been very direct and upfront with people to say that I don't. And because cases have stayed low in our environment, we've had the one case in particular, and things have worked, that doesn't mean then we should start reopening. That in fact means it's working. Let's stick with what's working. And I understand that's frustrating for people because they like their kids back full time. We would too. But again, from a public health perspective, it's working. And so we want to stick with what's working until there are other means of containing the spread of the virus relative to a vaccine or other strategies that are discovered along the way, if there are any. But we would love to be back 5 days. If we could, it's not possible now. And then I'm asked, well, what is the state talking about? What's the public policy conversation, et cetera? The only conversations I've heard at this point are conversations about handling what is anticipated to be a spike in numbers and difficulties over the next several months related to cold flu, related to intimate family gatherings, related to maybe some kind of letdown because people are getting a little bit exhausted with the precautions that they're taking. I'd encourage people to keep thinking about and being cognizant of the need to distance, the need to mask, and the need to recognize our interactions and where there could be danger. So the intimate family gatherings we really want to think about, I'm told, especially over the next couple of months, and being very aware of symptoms and taking the right precautions. Again, from the public policy perspective, I was in a meeting earlier this week with the commissioner. The only conversation was about managing a spike in numbers, managing testing, and managing these yellow, orange, and red zones throughout the state where there may be a pivot to more all remote. We're not anticipating that. We're not anticipating any change right now, but we are ready for it. We could pivot very, very quickly to either all remote or if there was a chance to open up more fully. We're prepared for those circumstances. We just don't anticipate there being a change, and we're really buckling up for the long haul, feeling as though this will be a longer circumstance, which makes connecting with kids and social emotional concerns all the more important to be thinking about. Mrs. Jacob, can you talk to us a little bit about that and some of the conversations we're having, what the thinking is right now?
Of course. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody. I think that, coming into this school year, that idea of creating connections and building community was at the forefront of all of the TCMS staff, all of the staff K-12 for that matter. I think that what we've been pushed to do is to think outside the box and be creative with how we're going to accomplish, number one, with the kids being hybrid, not seeing them every day. So that poses a problem and a challenge for us. And then in our remote world, not seeing the kids in the physical space as well. So our mental health staff at TCMS, I have to give a big shout out to them. They have been constantly, every week thinking and brainstorming about new ways to connect with kids. We see them pushing into classrooms more. We see them, our counseling groups are up and running, and we had to get a little bit more creative with space and capacity with those groups this year. And then another shout out just to our teachers as well, for allowing time and space within the classroom, both in the hybrid setting, but also in the remote world, to allow for that time for, peer-to-peer connections. I saw Mrs. Sarche is on here, and I have to give a shout out to her. She's been working with Nancy Mooney, who's our remote counselor, and starting math class with mindful math and allowing that time for students to connect in a different way, away from the curriculum, because we know it's so important. And I think that though we've been doing well and creating these opportunities, I think that is certainly an area that we know we want to improve on, and we're going to continue to work towards. So I would certainly welcome feedback from parents and students, because you're on the other end of this whole situation. I would love to hear your ideas, how we can better create those connections.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I've switched over to the remote feedback, thought I'd change feedback, and it's a good moment for me to point out to you that for the sake of efficiency and keeping this discussion moving, I moved over to this set of data and we'll go through these comments, but every single comment that's entered in our exchanges, no matter how big or small they are, is reviewed, is taken into account, and is shared. And we do think constructively about everything that's shared. And even if it is the lowest rated comment, it gets our attention as well, because it is still the most important to you, even though it may not have been shared in terms of importance with other people as they were rating. That doesn't mean it's still not important for us to look at, because it is maybe still your top priority if you shared that. So know that they're all reviewed, but for the efficiency of this conversation, it's important for us to keep moving. And we do really appreciate the reason why we're having this is the constructive feedback. So not just looking for the positives, we're definitely looking for what we can think about and continue to grow and learn. And really appreciate this comment. A seventh grader, like to thank all of our teachers. They're doing an amazing job. I agree. Thank you. Much appreciated. Will remote-only students be able to participate in clubs? Will they have a remote Zoom so they can participate? Remote kids need these opportunities even though they are not actually in the school building. Mr. Nunez, thoughts on that?
Yeah, all clubs have been designed to be conducted remotely. So at no time will a student, either hybrid or remote, be discouraged to participate. Anyone who wants to take part in a club has the ability to do so. So as we will start to push out communication regarding the clubs and offering and what clubs will be offered, please know that all of our remote students are welcome to participate, and all clubs will be Zooming in on their given times where they'll be meeting. So that information will be coming up, but absolutely we want all of our students to take part in any club that they are interested in.
Yeah, and just so people know too, both at the middle school but at the high school level in terms of athletics, if somebody has chosen to be remote, they are not excluded from the school environment. So in other words, where there do end up being times where things meet in person, and that will happen throughout the year, there are activities as they are created with all the right rules in place and socially distanced, families who chose to be remote for their instructional program can opt to come to things in person. They're not banned in any way by us from being there. We are providing remote opportunities to the greatest extent we can, but we do want people to know that if they then choose to have their child come into the building for things, they are welcome to do that. We'd encourage them to do that and hope to see them if they feel safe. And again, we've got all the protocols in place for that to happen. That's a personal family choice, but we want to make sure people know they can do that. Other great comments in here, a lot of compliments, people being impressed with the engagement of students, great discussions happening in the remote world, and we're glad to hear that. Some good feedback on passing time, that kind of scheduling, the 5-minute time, if that could happen, et cetera. Any thoughts on that, Jim, or maybe Dr. Malloy, about that kind of scheduling and the passing time piece?
Yeah, so we recognize that 3 minutes can be kind of a rush to get from one class to the next, and we also recognize that there are some classes that might run over a little bit in time as they end up, which would then cause a given student to be late to the next class. So a 5-minute passing time in the remote setting, definitely something that we can look at and consider in making some adjustments to the schedule. So I think that's something that we can definitely look at.
Great.
One difficulty to acknowledge, though, is that the vast majority of our teachers who are teaching remotely are also teaching in the hybrid world. There's very few teachers who are actually purely remote, where their entire classes are remote. So if you're a hybrid teacher, it could be that you're ending class and 3 minutes later you have a set of students in the hybrid world entering your room. So it would be a little bit of a challenge to extend it because the two worlds, although they're separate, they're intimately linked.
That's a really great point. I forgot to point that out to people. That's one of the challenges then in extending that. So great point. Thanks for bringing that up. There's this issue of social interaction again, comes up in this next comment. The breakout groups work well, but they also need remote activities, that are just social. I'd ask Ms. Jacob, actually, again, from the social emotional perspective, but also as a former high school assistant principal and expert in student activities and that kind of engagement, what would you encourage our remote people to be thinking about in that regard?
I think actually we Mr. Nunez, Dr. Malloy, and I just discussed this today and started brainstorming some opportunities that could be purely social interactions with students, maybe a virtual lunch space or something like that. Because again, not to sound like a broken record, but we know how crucial that connection is. I think that we are looking to create opportunities both in the hybrid and the remote world with that community building and tapping into some of our experts with our restorative practices and community circle building and things like that. We have a lot of staff in our remote world that are very well versed in this. And so maybe utilizing them in some ways, as well as pushing out. I know our counseling department, our mental health staff have some great ideas as far as like standalone activities to push out to families and students to also create some of that social interaction as well. So we're definitely thinking about it. And I think there's some unique venues that we can tap into in the remote world.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I see that addresses this other comment too about a Zoom lunch and how that could work and that kind of opportunity. So thanks for bringing that up too. There was a comment in here about outside activities counting for credit, whether it's outside athletic activities or arts activities, and could that count for people outside of school? Unfortunately, I'll address that. That's a state requirement that we are not allowed to accept those. That's come up often for course credit at the high school, for example. If people are involved in particular athletic activities, could that count towards their PE credit? For school activities, there are some exceptions allowed, but there is not for outside activities, unfortunately, and that's, again, a state requirement regarding curriculum instruction that we have to follow. I'm going to toggle off of this and ask while I stop sharing my screen, Mr. Nunez, can you address this school tool versus Schoology issue? A very frustrating piece, I know, for staff members and for parents around the fact that it's not a happy marriage between the two.
No, it was not a happy marriage. The two were not able to communicate over the long haul. So it was much to our demise that the two systems were unable to communicate to each other. It was our hope that if teachers were to input info, grades for that matter, into Schoology, that Schoology would be able to seamlessly transition that information into School Tool or vice versa. So with that not being the case, the decisions we've made moving forward will be as follows. Teachers have two options. Schoology is our instructional platform to be used. So they will continue to use Schoology as an instructional platform. They have the choice to, one, use the Schoology grade book that comes associated with the platform, but with that would have to then transition grades, a running average, into School Tool every 2 weeks. So then families would be able to see that running average. Or the second option is continue to use Schoology as the instructional platform, but then exclusively use School Tool as that grading platform as a means of communicating with families. So once that transition takes full effect into the start of the second marking period, it will be our hope that our teachers are going to communicate the decisions they've made to families to make that aware to them, to know where to look. We do recognize that with parent access to Schoology, there is the ability to look through grade functions also in that to communicate to families. So it'll be a means of informing families as to how to best do that. But moving forward into the second marking period would be our hope and our intent that teachers will be communicating what their choices will be in the platform that they'll be using to communicate the grade information.
Great. Thanks very much. I appreciate you addressing that. I'm going to take a look at the chat here in just a moment, but now would be a great time if anybody would like to unmute themselves. Brave souls we're looking for. Would like to engage in the conversation, bring anything up now. We're happy to have you do that. There's a comment here somebody sent me privately about not actually having those study halls, and that's actually not an issue at their level, but I would say the one issue is that that's at the 6th grade level. That will be different than 7th and 8th grade because of foreign language being gone in 6th grade, but being a state mandate in 7th and 8th grade. So that'll be a little bit different. There would be more of that at the 6th grade level. I would say rest assured it's not a solution for right now and probably not something people will be thrilled about, but as your kids progress, they will have less and less free time and less study halls. And suggestion here about teachers supervising the study halls. There are all sorts of different professionals in the building supervising study halls, but around that facilitating social interactions. And I think Sarah did a really nice job of getting at that and the notion of restorative practices and other ways that we might be able to utilize that time. I know Mr. Nunez mentioned that as well. So appreciate that. I think some of the chat comments were actually while we were answering those and are in line with what we're hoping to do as well. It's great feedback, great suggestions that we can share.
Dr. McGowan, if I could.
Also. Please.
I think, there's a 2 layers to the study halls, particularly a 6th. And, I agree with you completely that, a lot of it was the sting of the budget cut and, missing 6th grade foreign language. But I think it's kind of amplified by COVID because it does minimize the student movement. But one big hub of interaction that we've lost is our library. Students can't sign out of study halls to go to the library as easily, if at all. So, we're also limited by what we can do. And we're really, really trying to make sure that the students are never in an place where they're meeting in numbers larger than COVID capacity can meet. So had that same cut happened in a normal year without COVID restrictions, I don't think the sting of it would feel quite as bad.
Great point. Amy Benjamin brings up email communication and that teachers can include parents and students in theirs, but because of the way the system is set up in terms of safe addresses, outside the organization addresses, when the student replies, they can't copy a parent with that outside email address. Certainly something we can look into in terms of designated safe email addresses. I'm not sure if that's possible without putting our kids potentially at risk and jeopardizing that system the way it's designed to keep kids safe. And keep in mind, we have a series of rules that we have to follow relative to data privacy, student privacy, et cetera, in terms of those systems. But it's a really good suggestion that we should look into. I share the same frustration. I will have emails sent to me that I think is great communication from secondary level teachers, and my child will respond, well, I wrote back to them, but I say, well, in the adult world, then we CC the person on that so they see that response, so I don't have to ask you that question. My poor children have a lot of strategic business-like conversations that they probably don't appreciate very much, but I would like to be able to see that too, because I think then if I see that, I'm not wondering if there was a response or the courtesy of a response from my child. So I get it. So that's a good suggestion we can look at also. That's a suggestion from Sean about better descriptions, and I appreciate that. That's certainly something we can look at too. I think your kids may know some of those, but we could share more of that information and take a look at that. We're really great at education with a lot of acronyms and letters and names for things that people think, what is that? I have no idea. We speak it like a second language, but we need to be more clear in that. So great point. So Carrie, that we did also reduce some clubs in the budget. Unfortunately, some of that funding was lost also over the past couple of years. So I don't think there's a plan right now for the Magic Club, but certainly something as we look in the future and we look at need, desire, and ability to support additional clubs based on what students are expressing in the building, those are always a possibility. But right now, I do not believe there's a plan for that. Am I wrong in that, Dr. Malloy, Mr. Nunez, or Mrs. Jacob? Is there a plan for that club?
There currently is not, but I will just make a comment regarding the descriptions. I am working with another staff member to kind of compile the club list, if you will, that's going to be up and running starting next week. So we can certainly put that out to students and families so they can see what clubs are meeting, when they're meeting, and then a brief description of what the club will be doing. And that again is for both our hybrid and our remote learners.
Great, thank you. Comment here from Lindsay about any ideas about motivating kids, keep producing work. They get a little bit behind and then they get overwhelmed. We certainly see that. We see too in this environment, it's hard to keep contact with all of our kids. We recognize how difficult that is. I think frankly, particularly for middle school age kids who really need that social interaction, they need that time around with peers. I would just say, I would say the middle age level is a unique group. And that unique group needs to thrive with other people in that unique stage in life. And when they don't have that interaction with people also going through the same things at the same time, I think it presents some not to overuse the word, but unique challenges. So any thoughts on that from any one of the three of you about motivating and helping kids keep thinking about getting their work done? I see our school psychologist, Victoria Massetti, is on here too. Anything anybody would like to add or suggestions you could make? Guess I'd start out with Mr. Nunez.
Well, I think the first part is, first making sure that they are attending and engaging. It's really in this time, that we're dealing with, that home remote setting day is easy to try to navigate away. So I would say first, really start, setting in time management, utilizing your time effectively, knowing that you've got a task to do, get it done, and then you'll be able to do the other things that you want to do. But with the other social emotional components, I'll defer to Mrs. Jacob or Mrs. Mazzetti for that matter too.
Yeah, I think that, obviously routine and schedules are wonderful. I think also meeting your student where they are, and that can change on any given day. I mean, part of the what we're really trying to build at the middle level is that self-advocacy. So encouraging them to reach out to their counselor, reach out to their teacher, and just let them know where they're at any given time, I think is really crucial. And we have wonderful staff that are, ready to work with your learner and support them, with whatever they need. If it's, that specific day, there could be some hurdles, or if it's an ongoing thing, we're here to support them and to make sure that they're not going to fall behind. So I think that self-advocacy is really great to encourage your student.
Thank you. Mrs. Mazzetti, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I agree with both Mr. Nunez and Mrs. Jacob. I would really highlight that it's not so much about getting through the pile of work, and so much that always happens in middle school, where we focus on getting through the pile of work and getting through it, and did I hand this in, and did I do this, and did I write this? And I would really promote more of having the student understand the process of learning and having them engage in the curriculum in a different way, rather than being focused on getting through this to-do list or getting through the pile of work.
Great, thank you. There's a question here, and I don't know the person's name, but who goes by the name of True Healthy Balance on the Zoom. If you'd like to unmute and ask that, now would be a good time.
Sure, thank you very much. Just want to know, for the sixth graders, I know that the language has been canceled for this year, which is disappointing. It was a big factor of why we brought our family to Brighton after being an alum myself. The question I have is, though, IXL is a program that is well utilized for K through fifth grade. And I can tell you that my middle schooler, I've asked many times over the last year and a half to hop on IXL and just keep on working, and I keep being told that the account has been taken away. This past spring, summer, I had her using one of her younger siblings' accounts just so that way she could have access to the higher level math and other things such as social studies that was on there, some science, there's some ELA, there's even an option for Spanish. And I was just wondering if that's something that can be utilized for the students, or if there's another program to support the kids. So I guess I got two questions. Basically, can these older students still have access to the IXL since the district is already paying for it? Or is there a way, and the other question is there a way to get some sort of language involved for these older students who want to start learning the foreign languages earlier?
Great question. Dr. Baker is on the Zoom, and this would be, I think, an excellent one for her to jump in on. Your thoughts, Dr. Baker, on that?
Sure. The nature of the IXL license, it's a by building license. So currently we are subscribing at Council Rock and French Road, which is why your child had access. And in particular, we purchased the math license. So I'm kind of interested in knowing that they also had access to some of the other subject areas. I know in the spring, there were a lot of free licenses given out by many companies. And so, that may have attributed to why, your child had that level of access. What we do each year is we talk to the teachers about kind of what resource gaps we might have in our current, lineup, in our current collection. And then we take a look at what the largest gaps are, and then what the budget will allow us to provide. And so actually right now at the middle school, and the middle school has an exclusive license, we have chosen the News ELA/Social Studies subscription to supplement some of the resources we have in ELA and Social Studies. Have not subscribed to IXL as a building at the middle school.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. We can certainly take a look at that. We appreciate that feedback. Also, and I see Lindsay is suggesting the free Duolingo app for foreign language at home as well. So these are certainly great suggestions and things we can take a look at also. Eleanor, a couple great comments. Thank you very much. We appreciate the positive feedback. Question about win time and could students leave early then, since when it might not be so effectively used. I think for some kids it is, though, and that is time that they are using well, and so I don't think we'd want to lose that. But I think also really it's on us to be thinking about how can we engage kids more and utilize that time. I know it's a conversation the middle school has been engaged in now actually for a couple of years, but COVID has certainly ramped that up. And then another comment about the policy regarding keeping students engaged during study hall. They're asked to read, study, or put their heads on their desk, cannot talk to each other. Is there a way that they can at least use the extensive amount of time to get some social interaction? I think that gets to what we were speaking to before around community building and circles, et cetera. I also think during that time, if we're thinking about whether it's Duolingo or other potential app and technology solutions, maybe that's something that could be utilized at that time. But I don't know that we can answer it tonight either. I think that's something for us to be thinking about in terms of feedback. I just ask at this point, I want to make sure we give time and space to people who are watching on Facebook also. If there's anybody that is interested in offering a comment on Facebook, now would be a time to do that before we close out. And then also ask people, and Sean suggesting Khan Academy is another opportunity. That's a great point and well used by many of our students and community members, something to think about. But anybody else that wants to take the microphone off mute, and while they're thinking about that, I'm going to ask our administrators in the building, Jim, Sarah, and Mike, to think about anything they would like to close out with as we move towards the end of this. So it's kind of last call time for microphones, for the chat, and for Facebook Live. Anybody want to add anything for the good of the order? Sarah, Mike, Jim, anything you'd like to close with?
I would just like to say that, I am very proud to be leading a building with teachers who are so passionate about the work that they're doing. We have really done a great job of, one, maintaining a high level of safety in the building and being very mindful of that, but at the same time maintaining a high level of integrity with the instructional work that we've been providing for all of our students. And I could say that not only for our teachers in the building, but our teachers that are working remotely as well, who are doing a lot of great work out there and really engaging our students in real rich, authentic work. And so I'm very proud of the work that our teachers are doing. I'm very proud of the work that our students are doing with maintaining and contributing to the level of safety in our building and to maintaining to the rigors of the work that they are faced with. We recognize that this is a challenging time for all of us, but with all that being said, the work that's being done is truly remarkable, and I'm very proud of everyone that's doing the work.
I would add that I've been really impressed with how flexible the students have been. Typically, a middle school student really thrives on routine and knowing what to expect. I think that gives them the bandwidth to deal with things that come up that are unexpected. But in this COVID time, so much is unexpected, and even what we thought were normal, simple routines are questioned. So I'm really impressed with their wherewithal and how flexible they are and rolling with the punches.
And I would just say, I would like to encourage everyone. I think I can speak for Mike and Jim about this. Continue to reach out. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from your child. That is so important, and that's how we get better. So please continue to reach out, email us, call us directly, so that we can best support your child.
Can I share something from our experience as parents?
Sure, please.
Hi. I think transition to middle school, I think I felt that the middle school TCMS is taking learning more serious compared with, my son was French roll last year, because for our experiences, my child, he has IEP and then he's an ENL learner in a virtual learning model. And learning in this type of pandemic, in this model and pandemic time, it's not really easy for us. So he really needs a significant support for the learning. And I need those help to support my son for his needs. So, it's like a change of sequence. But, I think thanks for the support from his teacher, his team, and Miss Sachet. And also, especially, I would like to mention about the social study teacher, Miss Casados. Because, from her, I really see a teacher who put a lot of efforts in making her class meaningful and connected. Because she has a guest speaker in her class, and then she offer research skill with the librarian's help. I'm talking, please. And then I work on water project. And I'm learning all this with my son. Chinese, English, so we are doing both. But I think these are all, since I see this teacher, she's constantly thinking about connect, things meaningful, and then, how to make that, to make her student learning. And so she not only send out word, but I think, there's a lot of work, but she's not only send out word, but I think the point is she's offered the extra help at the same time. So she will send an email to the whole student, say, if you need extra help, let me know. So we just take her extra help, as we could. And I think with that kind of help, we see, okay, my son's learning, I'm learning with him. So I'm really happy to see this. So I want to share this with you because I think we felt lucky to have such a great teacher in the middle school and in Brighton School District. Yeah, thank you for, doing all this. We appreciate giving us time and feedback for this. Yeah.
Michelle, that means so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for all that you're doing and you're doing for your child. What an incredible challenge. I think what you just expressed gets at some of the complicated layers of this, right? To try and meet so many needs in so many different ways and really continue to think about every child in every way, every day, the way we'd like to, with all these additional barriers and complications. And people have done a really remarkable job, but you as parents have also. And the perseverance and the grit and resiliency that your kids are learning from you, I think is pretty remarkable as well. So thank you for the compliment. It is taken very much to heart and will be shared and is so appreciated. And I'm glad Laura's on the screen too to be hearing about this great work. And yes, thank you for that. And we appreciate it, but we also appreciate the support and the partnership that you're providing too. So hats off to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached the end. I would say this, please keep your distance physically, although stay close to us, keep your distance, keep your mask on, and keep thinking about this because it has gone very, very well and people have stayed safe. And we don't want there to be any letdown in that. And please think carefully about the gatherings that you're going to have and the experience over the next several months and pay attention to those symptoms. It's gone well from a public health perspective, but let's keep it that way. And thank you for all you're doing to keep people safe and for this feedback, both the constructive and the places where we can keep growing, but also the positive is much appreciated. Also, we'll share that and we'll try to do more of that. So thank you for that. Appreciate you attending tonight. And by all means, please reach out to us. Let us know what else that we can do along the way to keep learning, growing, and improving each and every day. Have a great night, everybody. Stay safe. Take care.
This has been a special presentation from 12 Corners Middle School.